Okay, there we go. All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is our first live call, one of two live calls for this 4-week fasting group. So we're midway through the group, and so this first week we've been doing intermittent fasting. So I know that several of you have already been sharing how many hours you're going. So you're off to a good start.
Yes. Mary and I, as I said in the intro, we were so excited to do this group together because we've done a lot of other groups together, but we've never had the opportunity to do fasting together. She's done fasting with someone. I have a fasting group that I do, but together. So we're super excited about it. Um, and tonight we want to really educate you. We want to talk about intermittent fasting. We want to talk about our favorite reasons to fast. We're going to talk about what we're covering next week, and any other things that you guys like to talk about. So we'll start with intermittent fasting.
Yeah, so that is our goal for this week. And we don't, so a lot of people are already doing some sort of intermittent fasting. So this first week might not be as challenging for those folks. But for people who haven't done any fasting, just hitting that 16 hours can feel very daunting. And so there's lots of benefits to fasting. Intermittent fasting allows you to get that break, gives your body a break from having to process the food that you're eating. It allows time for our insulin to come down, for our blood sugar to come down. It helps our ketones. It gives time for our ketones to ramp up. And we generally just have more energy and mental clarity when we're not always eating. So those are general benefits.
Intermittent fasting to me is a lot of times when people have been keto, it starts to happen naturally. As I look back before I had really studied and learned everything that I know about fasting, that happened about 2 months, 3 months into keto. My appetite was down, and I started to realize, like, if I go back and look, then intermittent fasting was definitely a thing. um, I like to, when I'm talking to clients about intermittent fasting, I like to say, one of the first things I ask them is, what time do you start eating in the day? And then we walk through, and I'm like, how many eating events do you have in the day? So when someone says, well, I start the day at like 6 o'clock and I have, a fatty coffee or something like that. And then the next thing they have is at 9, and the next thing they have is at 12, and the next thing they have, and basically the last meal they eat, it's 8 o'clock at night. And
Long ago.
the way that keto actually works best is with insulin control. So intermittent fasting is all about two things. It's about making more hours where your insulin is not active or not being triggered, and less hours and less events. Both things, not just the number of hours, but the number of eating events. It's pulling them in. So if you have someone who's eating, say, 1,800 calories and it's spread out over a long period of time, you can have that same person eat the same number of calories in a short period of time, and they will lose fat. And this really flies in the face of the idea that calories in, calories out is what matters. It's the truth. You can literally take the same food, put it in a shorter window, in fewer eating events. And the reason for that is because insulin tells our body to store fat. If our body gets a signal from insulin, we go into fat storage. If we have no signal from insulin, we stay in fat burning mode. So again, if you take 1,800 calories and you eat them in a 6-hour window for 18 hours, your body, your insulin's at rest. Does that make sense? So I like for people to think about it that way. And I know one of the things I asked myself when I was pushing IF, or when I was saying, do I want to stay fasted for one more hour? Do I want to eat? I would say, do I want to stay in fat burning right now, or do I want to go in fat storage? It's a question to ask yourself, right? You're like, well, I could break right now. I'm a little bit hungry, but if I if I push 2 more hours, I'm going to stay in fat burning versus fat storage, because you're always one or the other. And I think that's really neat. I always just think of the whole day as like a loop. And I'm like, how much out of that loop do I want to be in fat burning versus fat storage?
Right.
What stimulates insulin? Eating. But what you eat matters too.
Right.
Stimulates it a little bit, protein a little bit more, and then carbs really stimulate insulin. We want to avoid that as much as possible and narrow down the times it happens, because then we go into fat storage versus fat burning mode.
Right. And so I know all of you have heard, from the diet and nutrition community that, you need to eat several small meals a day to keep your metabolism going. And I don't know why people think that's true. And I don't know where the science, is that says that, but literally every time we eat, there's an insulin response. So if you're eating all day long, your insulin's going to be elevated all day. Your blood sugar is going to be elevated all day. I'm a recovering, type 2 diabetic. I was diagnosed with diabetes, but I no longer have symptoms of diabetes. But one of the things I was told by my diabetic nutritionist was that I needed to eat frequently and I needed to eat carbs, which are the two worst things you can do if you're carb intolerant, if you're, insulin resistant. We need to give our insulin a break by, having the fewer eating events as possible. So ideally 2 meals a day in a 6 hour window or even a 4 hour window, that's going to get you optimal results.
Yeah.
So 12, we see people, fast like 12 or 14 hours. That's really not enough. Like that's just like on average. So you want to aim for a minimum of 16. This week we're looking for 16 or 18. If you go a little longer, that's fine. But you're looking for that minimum amount of 16 hours. And it's not so much like Jessica was just saying a few minutes ago, like you can have the same calories spread out over the day, but eat it, or eat it in a shorter window and you can lose fat. It's not the eating in the shorter window part. It's that you are not eating for a longer time,
Right.
right? So that's where you're getting the fat loss, and it definitely defies the whole calories in, calories out. And there are people who say, well, if you're fasting, you're in a deficit. Well, perhaps, maybe, but it's literally the not eating. Our body responds to eating food. And when we don't eat food, our body does all these amazing things, like all these amazing processes happen when we don't eat.
Yeah, so I'll give you guys an example. I'm pretty much at my goal weight. I stay around the same weight all the time, and I still fast regularly. I fast daily. I intermittent fast, and then as we move into other weeks, I'll talk about other types of fasting that I do. But um, I think it's really, really important to have the right mindset. If you're constantly thinking about weight loss on fasting, you will get so frustrated.
Yes.
So remember what I said, when you're not eating, you are burning fat. You have no other fuel source, right? There isn't. So there's no possibility you're burning anything except fat. So I have been fasted before, and I'd step on the scale, my weight would be up. What does that mean? Does it mean I gained fat overnight? No, it just means I'm retaining water for some reason, right? And so it's so important to have the right perspective on what you can achieve. We do lose fat while we're fasting. There's no way that we don't, right? We have to have a fuel source. We're not feeding ourselves carbs, so we have to have a fuel source. We are burning our fat. So you have to sort of get over the idea that the scale is always going to reflect your good work. You can look in the mirror and see that you look thinner when you're fasting. You clothes are looser when you're fasting, but sometimes those scale fluctuations don't match. I can tell you now that sometimes when I fast, I lose weight, and sometimes I don't. And it seems to defy logic, but you have to accept that it doesn't really matter if it says I'm losing or not, because I am burning fat for energy. That is the only thing I can be burning. And in terms of like, again, flying in the face of the calories in, calories out, one of my clients today asked me what I was eating. I was like, well, I'm eating twice, and I don't normally focus on my eating window, but I am because we're doing this fasting class. And I said, so I have a 4-hour window, and I recently switched my window. I talked about how you can slide your eating window to make it fit your lifestyle. Well, I'm experimenting with eating very early. So by 8 a.m. today, I had already had 1,880 calories. And so later, I also had a half of a pound of bacon. So I don't know how many calories that was, but my point is, you are not going to gain fat when you're only eating twice in a 4-hour period if you're eating things like that are fat and protein. And I
Right.
think, again, it's the mindset. And if you've not been exposed to this before, you're like, how in the world is that possible? How do you not gain weight? You're eating this many calories. And I believe if I was eating the same amount of calories, or if I was eating calories from carbohydrates or something else, if I was eating that amount, I would gain. So I think it's really important to know that IF works best with keto. It works best with protein and fat because they don't create a huge insulin reaction, and your insulin returns back to rest much, much more effectively when you eat those two things versus when you eat carbohydrates.
Right. It is very important, what you eat. There are people, I don't know how, there are people who don't eat keto but practice fasting.
Woo,
And I just can't
hard.
imagine like how awful or miserable that would feel. Plus, for people that aren't in ketosis, that aren't producing ketones, they are not going to be burning fat when they're fasting. If your glucose is too high or you're eating lots of carbs, you have to fast long enough to burn those off first and then get to the fat burning stage. So you have an advantage being keto is that, from the get-go, you're pretty much burning fat because you are, that's your primary fuel, and you're eating foods that are not stimulating insulin and not causing you to go into fat storage mode. What was I going to say? Uh, regarding, oh my gosh, I just had another brain spaz. What was I going to say?
I think there's a couple questions, but for some reason my chat went away and I can't see it. I
Oh,
can see it
let's
pop
take care
up,
of
but then
that
I
and then
can't.
maybe it'll come back to me. Um, Debbie says, if I start eating in the morning, I'll want to eat all day. So I'm trying not to eat till around 1 or 3. Okay.
Yes.
That has definitely like been an issue for people because like sometimes like when you come off a fast, eating can beget more eating. Like, so especially like longer. Oh, that's what I was going to say was that it's important that you don't like, you don't look at fasting as like a license to eat more. So
Right.
because you're going to be fasting and that doesn't mean like eat everything that you want in this 4 or 6 hour window.
Right.
And then what you break your fast with is important too. So if I don't know what you're breaking your fast with, but it should be like something, break your fast with
Protein.
fatty and, fatty protein, mostly fat. Otherwise, breaking with a carb meal or a meal that has carbs, that could actually stimulate why you feel hungry all day. So
Well,
what you break with is important too.
well, I was going to say too about the eating begets eating. We used to talk about that, and I experienced the same thing. I used to experience the same thing that if I was like, oh, I'm going to eat in the morning, I would wind up eating all day, and so I would wait till the longest possible, and I might eat a 4-hour window between 4 and 8. So the difference in me moving my eating window to the morning, that was a separate experiment. I learned that we dump about twice as much insulin, our body does that at night versus the same food in the morning. So I wanted to experiment with what happened if I moved my window to the morning. That was super weird for me because I didn't get hungry in the morning. So I had to manipulate that. I said, well, I'm going to eat in the morning. And I noticed for 2 weeks when I shifted that window, it didn't matter how much food I ate in the morning, I was starving at night. But that was my body having that memory of,
Hmm.
It's like the bell
Conditioned
ringing.
to
Hey,
receive
it's dinner
food.
time. You always eat at this time. So I think that's part of it too, is that when we normally eat at a certain time, our body will scream, "Hey, you forgot to eat. You
Yeah.
should be hungry right now." And you literally feel like, I can feel like an empty pit, even though I had like over 2,000 calories. So it took me a couple of weeks of just choosing to eat in the morning, and then realizing I don't need more food tonight, and sitting with the discomfort of that, and then my body stopped screaming at me at night, and now I don't feel that urge to eat at night. So I
Right.
think I moved it purposely for kind of a scientific experiment. Those of you that know me know I love experimenting, and so that was part of it. But if you do feel that, if you have that issue and you're trying to, for whatever reason, eat earlier or change your eating window, and you feel that ravenous layer, it's because your body's just used to you eating at that time.
Right. Your body
Um,
is conditioned to receiving food. Like if you have a pattern of eating at the same times every day, your body is
yes.
conditioned to receiving food at that time. And I had a similar experience to Jessica a couple of years ago after going to Low Carb Houston. I think it was 2018 Low Carb Houston. And I heard a couple of speakers, and they were talking about women and fasting and women of menopause, like or perimenopause and menopause age, which
Mhm.
I was like coming into. And so I did the same thing. I used to like skip breakfast and go, and I wouldn't eat till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I would still only eat twice, but I was eating in the afternoon or even in the evening sometimes. So when I first flipped that window, I made the mistake of not starting eating early enough. And so what ended up happening the first few days until I caught on was I ended up like eating, trying to cram everything into like this 2 hour window because I had a cutoff. I had to stop eating by a certain time, but I was used to not eating in the morning. And so after a few days of that, I realized I have to retrain my body
Yes.
by eating earlier, even if I didn't feel hungry. And
Right.
so that first week was kind of rough, like and not eating later in the day and needing to realize that yeah, I've eaten enough food for the day. This isn't real hunger. And it was a very similar experience to when I
Mhm.
first started keto and was not eating the carbs that I was craving. And it just took a few days to get used to. But it and I did not change the amount of food I ate or the food that I ate. But when I switched my eating window, lost 13 pounds over 6 weeks
Mhm.
from
Um,
switching the eating window. So it will make an impact. So if you are currently, follow like doing the typical fasting that most people do, skipping breakfast, switch it up. If you're stalled, switch it up, reverse your eating window and see what happens.
I'm a big fan of changing one thing at a time, though. So if you are just adding in intermittent fasting, you haven't done that before, just focus on that. But
Right.
one of the
I
cool
mean, for
things,
people that are already intermittent
yeah,
fasting.
if you're already doing that, changing your window works. And I was just thinking about the thing about mindset of fasting, and I'm going to do a special post about the top pitfalls of fasting. But the mindset has to be, I'm eating for today's hunger.
Mhm.
And the thing that I see people struggle with most often is they gear up for a fast. They're like, I'm going to eat more because I know I'm not going to be eating again for a while. So they actually overeat before it starts,
Mhm.
or because they're eating in anticipation of future hunger. And I find that actually makes you hungrier if you eat more.
Mhm.
I do extended fasting, and when I do that, I taper down. If I'm going to start an extended fast on a Sunday, then starting on Friday, I'll eat less. And it literally is painless going into a fast that way versus what I used to do was like, ooh, let me eat a lot because I'm not going to be eating for a period of time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the opposite thing is that people do that at the end. They've not eaten and they think, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten for a while. Let me eat more to make up for it.
No, don't make up
And
for it.
part of the reason is in this community, there's this saying fasting or feasting. And
Mhm.
I think it is far better to call yourself fasted or fed
Mhm.
versus fasted or feasting. And then recently I've taken that even further, And the best mindset that you can really have is I am always fed, whether I'm eating or not. My body is continuously fed. It is either fed by the nutrition I'm giving it from eating, or it is fed because it is continuously eating the fat on my body. So if you really think about it and you have that moment where you're like, I'm so hungry, I know there's times I've been like, well, so what? My body is fed. I mean, I might feel hungry, which is a mental game, but my body is absolutely fed. I'm carrying around, thousands of calories worth of fat still on my body. Nothing bad's going to happen. Your mindset has to be, I am always fed. And when I choose to break my fast, you'll need to experiment. I know Mary said, break with fat. I used to do that. One of the things I found, if I eat too much fat to break, tummy troubles. And I don't know if some of you guys deal with that, but a lot of people, when they break a fast, they have an emergency bathroom trip. And I have found over time that if I break with just like a boiled egg or some cut up chicken or something really small, and then I ramp up to a full meal, that works much better than just having something. Like back in the day, I'd break with like a fatty coffee or something, but now I tend to break with like protein, like an egg, which is like about 50-50 fat and protein. So you have to play around with that a little bit and notice if you have any bathroom issues when you break your fast too.
Well, and most people, when they first begin fasting, even intermittent fasting, experience, no matter what they break with, they do experience some digestive issues. But what happens is, as you become more consistent with fasting and the longer you're keto, your gut will start to heal and you won't
Yes.
respond to that, anymore. I can remember when I first started fasting, definitely having issues. And then later I started doing extended fasting, and like my first extended fast, when I broke, I had some issues, but the more I did it, it came to a point where I could fast 6 days and I could break with a prime rib with no issue.
Right. Yeah.
So you're going to heal over time. So but you're going to have to experiment and play around to figure out like what you respond best to. I was just reading something yesterday that somebody posted on Instagram about fasting, and there was like a little blurb about, and it actually said that eggs weren't recommended to break a fast. But I'm like, I eat scrambled eggs for like breaking a fast. I've done
I
that
think
many
it's the
times.
perfect fast break food.
I
So
think so
yeah.
too. So like, there's all kinds of opinions out there. And the bottom line is you're just gonna have to like experiment on yourself and see what you respond best to. And
Right.
always start small too. Like, if you're coming up, like if you just started intermittent fasting and hadn't fasted that long before, you definitely don't want it to be a big meal. You want to like kind of wade in
Yes. Wade in. I always say break it. I tell people to break gently.
gently. Yeah.
So as you are, and I know like, okay, there's not that many of us in this group. What do we have? 10 or so in the me and you. Don't be afraid to ask questions about like food. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, like, because fasting affects all of our organs, our body functions.
Mhm.
Ask the question. It is not embarrassing at all. It is part of it's part of what occurs, and we need to talk about things like that, because if you have an incident where you constantly have to run to the bathroom, people will stop fasting rather than ask about how can I change what I'm doing so I don't have this issue.
Right.
And so it's really important to just talk about it. The ultimate kind of intermittent fast is OMAD. And if you've probably seen that word in the keto community or the fasting community, it stands for 1 meal a day. And we're going to talk about that and challenge you next week with that. But I found as I became fat adapted, I naturally went to 1 meal a day. And it was a meal in the evenings. If you are someone who can eat a lot of food at one time, you don't have any trouble getting in plenty of calories in one meal, which I don't. If you eat a high amount of fat, which I do, it's not hard to get in plenty of calories in one meal. My body went to that instantly. And I know, I think Debbie asked, again, I can't see the chat, but I see it when it pops
Yeah,
up.
we
I
have
don't know.
some questions we need to get to.
She asked about mixing things up, I think.
Okay.
And and I for a solid year ate one meal a day, and I continued to lose weight and fat during that time. It was, at least an entire year of eating one meal a day. But I will say was very important that I ate enough food during that time. I have clients that come to me and they're eating one meal a day and they're stalled, and that's when I say you need to spread this out. You need to have one small meal and one big meal, to make sure that you get it all in. So it depends on you. I do think we need to change things up, but only if you get to a place where something's not working.
Right.
If
That's what I'm gonna
it's
say.
working
If,
for you, just keep doing it.
yeah, if you're
There's
not
no need
broke,
to
don't
change.
fix it.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So change it up if, you know, like if what you've been doing repeatedly isn't getting you the results you want, or it's producing no results and you feel like you're spinning your wheels, then definitely do something different. But I'm definitely in the camp of if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right, right. Well,
Um,
again, OMAD is like if you think about it, one meal a day is about a 24-hour fast. Only you
yeah.
still get to eat every day. So I thought it was amazing. I'm like, I'm fasting for 24 hours, but I don't have to skip any days eating. I would eat, I would fast from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. I would eat, and then I would eat again the next day at dinner. And so if you think about that, it's just pushing that window a little bit more. It's making it a little bit narrow. And I had amazing results with that. So that's something that, again, I recommend trying, and that's going to be part of our challenge next week.
Jennifer says, so do you stay away from veggies when you're eating in a 4 hour window? You if you like vegetables, eat vegetables. It doesn't matter if your window is 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours. Like if eat vegetables if you want to. I
One,
don't particularly like veggies, and I only eat them like I go through phases where like I want them and then I'll eat them and then I'm over it and I stop. So I mostly eat meat, but don't feel like you can't eat them.
yeah, I part of what I've figured out, and I think everybody has a formula, and there are a million different little things you can play with, which is so fun and exciting because you're never really stuck. There's always something you can move or try or experiment with. So when it keeps you from feeling frustrated. You're like, okay, well, I'll just try this. I'll move my window. I'll do this. I'll add more veggies. I'll take away veggies. What worked for me, and I have to go back now because it's been 5 years. So what worked for me during my weight loss, fat loss time is when I did have keto approved carbs, veggies, I ate them all in one meal. I found it was very difficult to spread out 20 carbs over multiple meals. So if I was trying to keep my carbs under 20 and I was eating vegetables, I would make sure I had all my carbs in one meal. In fact, I did the same thing because my protein had to remain rather moderate at that time for me to lose. So I would have one meal that was mostly carbs and fat, say a green salad with all kinds of different fatty dressing and um, avocado. And so it's your carbs and your fat. And then the other meal was mostly meat, because it was hard for me to split my protein up. So things like that are ways that you can tweak. When I would eat that way, I would eat the carby meal earlier in the day, so it had more time to burn through those carbs and really get into fat burning mode, and then interrupt it less with the second meal, if that makes sense.
Right. So next week, so this week, you know, the focus is intermittent fasting. Next week, we're going to talk about the 24-hour fast or OMAD. And so all like there's still you're still getting all the main, you know, fasting benefits, but the difference is with getting like 20 to 24. And everybody's different. It just depends on how deeply adapted you are. But when you extend into that 20 to 24-hour period, you hit autophagy, which
Right.
with the shorter fasts, some people may not get that. You have a better chance of experiencing autophagy if you are keto and fat adapted, and you might possibly hit it at 16 or 18 hours, but you're more likely to hit it at 20 or more.
Right. So for most people, for people who are attempting to fast as part of their lifestyle, but they're not eating a ketogenic diet, it takes 3 days
Yes.
to really get into autophagy, which is that cell turnover. It's and this will go into the reason why I fast now. It's the part where you start looking younger and you have a glow and your skin starts tightening up. That is what autophagy does for you. So my main reason for fasting now is tighter skin, a glow, a healthy look. I can tell you, nobody will know that I'm fasting, and in that week that I'm fasting, people will be like, "Oh my gosh, you look so good this week. What's going on? You got a glow." And I'm like, it's a true thing. I know when I initially lost weight because my face had gotten, it was heavy. I weighed 309 pounds. I had saggy neck skin, and I firmly believe with all my heart that fasting made that go away. Like, I've literally had people ask me, like, did you get something done? I'm like, no, literally fasting made it go away. I had a little turkey hangy thing, and it was upsetting. But I just kept going. I added in fasting. I started doing some different types of fasting, extending it a little bit more, and I noticed that it went away. So for me, that is the number one reason. I think it heals your skin. It gives your elasticity comes back, and it is worth it to me. And I will always fast. I'm not trying to achieve a certain weight loss or fat loss. I know that it does that for me. So for me, I choose to do extended fasting because extended fasting after 24 hours, I'm in autophagy. That my cells are turning over. The old dead cells that are making my skin look old or saggy are turning over quickly, and I'm creating new cells, and it makes me look younger. Or I'm delusional, but in my mind, it does. Um, People have told me that. So I'm a huge fan of it for that reason. You need to know what your reason is for fasting. You really have to have a great, like, what is my mindset? What am I trying to accomplish? And it truly does need to be more than weight loss. Yes, it helps with your weight loss, but it really needs to be about more. It has to be more about healing and things happening in your body. Because when you heal, when you have those periods that your organs, just especially your digestive organs, they just get to rest. When they heal, when you do eat, they will work better, and it will be easier for you to lose weight. You can heal your insulin resistance. Um, Somebody asked me today what that means because we say it so often, we just assume people know what it means. But when you're someone who's been eating all day, remember this is my insulin at rest, but I eat here and here and here and here. About the time I'm about to go back into fat burning mode, I eat again. So I stay kind of in fat storage mode all day. So I'm getting these multiple insulin reactions. And when my body gets so used to needing insulin to respond to blood sugar spikes all day, it's just this constant flow of insulin. And your body's like, okay, whatever, you're sending me insulin. It has to compensate by sending even more to control that blood sugar. It's like it just doesn't care that you're flooding your body with insulin. It isn't controlling the blood glucose anymore because you're constantly doing it. We aren't meant to have these blood glucose spikes all day long. What we're meant to have is one or two or three, and by having them all day long, you have a blood glucose spike. Insulin comes down to push down the blood glucose, and it controls it. But if you do it all the time, insulin's always coming and your blood glucose will just stay high. And so your body has to turn on, it's an excess insulin that creates insulin resistance. But that can be healed with fasting for sure.
Right. And as far as like the insulin resistance goes too, that the we're supposed to have, that steady blood sugar. And when you're keto, so like, someone who's not keto and is eating, they're still getting, spikes. And it's normal for our blood sugar to elevate a little bit, but not to do like wild highs and
Right.
lows. So when you're keto and you're eating mostly fat and protein, you do have a little bit of a bump,
Just
but
a
it's not
little,
like, it doesn't look like the roller coaster, right?
right?
So if you were measuring your blood sugar throughout the day and you've got this roller coaster, then something's wrong, like the insulin resistance is not healed yet, or the food you're eating is causing too much of a spike. You want it to look like a slow wave. Yeah.
Well, again, that's like how, if you look at food, I like to look at food. What does this food do for me?
Mhm.
And that's the attractions. Like, what do I choose to eat? I choose to eat based on what it does for me. So if I'm choosing to eat a fatty steak, I know that I'm going to have a little bump, but I'm going to quickly return to fat burning. If I choose to eat a giant salad with extra carby stuff like tomatoes and a ton of stuff like that, that is carbs, right? And so I'm going to have a bit more of a spike, and it's going to take longer for my blood glucose to go back down. So between the two things, I'm going to choose the thing that keeps me in fat burning mode because I feel best. Again, for me, it's not about weight loss at this point. Fat converts to ketones. Ketones not only fuel our body, but they fuel our brain. In the past, I have struggled with horrific mental health issues. And for me, fasting and keeping my windows small and eating less carbs, my ketones stay much higher that way. And I can think clearly. I don't have to take a ton of meds for anxiety and depression and things like that. So there's also that benefit. It actually helps you think more clearly. If you have something that you're working through in your life and you can't seem to figure out the answer, a lot of times if you will take a period and fast, things you can just see the whole situation much more clearly. Great speakers almost always speak fasted because they can think more clearly. And the reason for that is their body is burning fat, and ketones are great for your brain. We think best when we're functioning with higher ketones.
Right. You definitely get that mental clarity, and you'll experience some of that in weeks 3 and 4 when we do a little bit more extended fasting. But with the extended fasting, there's that point where you get like euphoric. You feel like almost high, right? Like because you just feel really good, and that's one of the other added benefits of the extended fasting, which we'll talk more about on our next call. But
Right.
yeah. So do you all have any questions like about I think though the first week is kind of easy because I think most of y'all were any of you not intermittent fasting before this week, or not going more than 16 hours. So Deb,
Debbie just
you were
said,
not?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it
Um,
does help you reel it in too, because even and honestly, on keto, and I have been there too, you get into a groove. Like you're like, okay, I know keto, and I know you've been low carb or keto forever, and you just are like, this is what I eat. You stop really thinking about choosing to time your meals. You just eat what you want to eat, and it's okay. But you know what? When you do that, you typically stay around the same. You don't lose any weight. I call it a coasting period. And certainly in my journey, I've had periods of coasting. And when I think about those times, I was a little bit sloppy. I never ate things I shouldn't, but I didn't put thought into when I was eating. And I didn't put that much thought into exactly what I was eating. I just knew it was keto. And so you can go for a little while and coast, but then if you start to feel yourself being frustrated, like, okay, but now I'm not losing weight, even though I eat really well, putting time into it and really starting the day with intentions about when you're going to eat, creating some structure in your window and saying, okay, well, even if I'm not changing the things that I eat right now, I'm going to, if I've been eating for 8 hours, I'm going to eat for 6. If I've been eating for 6 hours, I'm going to pull it in and try 4. I'm going to take 1 hour off the morning and 1 hour off the night and just close my window a little bit. That works. And then if you also tweak what you're eating, I think the other thing that happens when you start to fast is your real hunger and full reflexes because you're getting rest. Those hormones are resting, your leptin and your ghrelin. you start to realize what real hunger feels like again. You know, we have emotional hunger, we have habitual hunger, we have hunger that's stimulated because other people are eating or by seeing a keto dessert or by smelling
Smelling
food.
something. Mhm.
Right, right. That is not hunger that means I need to nourish my body right now. When you fast and you remember like, oh, this is what real hunger feels like, it helps you kind of weed out the other stuff and it really does help you reset. So I think fasting it does that. It keeps you, I always say fasting keeps me sharp. It keeps me aware of what real hunger feels like versus head hunger or emotional hunger.
That's right. So I think it was you, Debbie. I saw you went almost 18 hours today. Is that right? And how did that feel? Just curious, like since you go ahead.
Yeah, um, it was a little bit harder for me today than it was the last 2 days. And I'm not quite sure why. Your comment to me about making sure I get my electrolytes, I think that was, I do need to make sure that I'm getting that. I had a few cramps this morning before I got out of bed.
Magnesium.
But I was just getting, when I ended it at 17 hours and 45 minutes, it was like, I need to eat.
Yes,
You know,
that
I was still at
urgency.
work. I was getting a little bit lightheaded, a little bit, and
Yeah.
my blood sugar was down to 80. But I did notice that my ketones have been going along for like the last month at like 0.5. And then today they're up to 1.5.
Oh wow.
So
So you're seriously burning some fat. It's nice to see that. They say the
yeah,
perfect blood glucose is 83.
83,
And
yeah.
so
So
if you're around 80, that is amazing and very, very good and healthy. But if you're not used to that, if you're used to it being a little higher, it might feel like you might feel like you're having some symptoms from that. Just
right.
a thing that I say to every client when they express interest in fasting, and that is if you ever get to the point, I mean, you can be starving, you can be legitimately hungry and choose not to eat. And knowing that your body is fed because it's eating your fat, nothing bad's going to happen. But if you ever feel unwell, like you feel dizzy, you're going to pass out, you're seeing spots, things like that, break your fast. I mean, it's so important. Never your body's trying to tell you something if you're experiencing like dizziness or spottiness. Most of the time it's an electrolyte issue. The other thing about electrolytes is, and if you were having cramps, that's almost always magnesium. But the other thing about electrolytes is when you're fasting, you normally are getting some of that in your food. You're getting some magnesium, you're getting sodium in the foods that you eat. And if you are not eating that, you have to supplement that more, especially sodium. And what I found is if I am fasted and I'm all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I am ravenous. I can take salt and put it on my tongue and let it dissolve and drink with water, and my hunger goes away. It is amazing, actually. So it's a pretty good trick for that. But remembering that if I'm not eating salt or I'm not eating salty food throughout the day, and that's what I'm used to, I've got to have extra sodium and consume that. And again, if you're having cramps, then certainly magnesium would be a good one. Do you have the Keto Chow magnesium drops, or they actually have a fasting drop too that has more sodium in it?
yeah, I think she has them. She had them on the cruise.
Yeah, I have both of them. And today I just didn't remember to take it.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
have the rock salt or the salt rocks that I
Just suck on it.
stuck
Yeah.
on during the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in general, when you're fasting, if you get lightheaded or you feel like suddenly hungry or you start to feel fatigued, usually the go-to fix is salt. Like that's the first thing, to try. And if it's a salt issue, like you feel better fairly quickly. Like I would say like within 15, 20 minutes.
Right. The number one thing I hear from people in terms of symptoms is headache when
Yeah.
they're fasting if they're not used to doing that. And that can be because you're consuming less caffeine. You know, some people when they're fasted, they don't, they drink a lot more water, so it flushes out their sodium, which can also give you a headache. So the number one thing that people say to me when they're fasted is that they get a headache in terms of symptoms. And what I always say is, they're like, should I eat? And I'm like, why don't you treat the headache first? And then see if you need to eat. Because sometimes they eat and they're like, I still have a headache. I'm like, okay, so instead of breaking your fast, try treating the headache first. Either with electrolytes, I mean, even if I have to take a Tylenol, I'm going to take a Tylenol. I don't break my fast. My headache goes away and I keep right on fasting. We think sometimes that breaking is going to fix all those symptoms, and it just doesn't. We've got the headache because we have drank so much water and we have not compensated with salt.
Right. So that, speaking of the water, it's like important that you know, watch your water. Like, you want to be hydrated, but there are a lot of people who really overdo water.
Yeah.
So, and especially when they're fasting, because they're looking for the mouth party, they're looking for something to do while they fast, and so they end up, you know, drinking way too much water. And there is such a thing as too much water, and it will flush out your electrolytes. You'll feel like trash. You will not feel good at all. So try to just drink to thirst, and not try to purposely like guzzle down. Like, I see people like on social media all the time, like with their, you know, I'm drinking 2 gallons today. Why? That's way too much. Don't drown yourself in water. Drink, you know, when you're thirsty, and don't overdo it.
And I think thirst is like hunger too. You have days where you are much hungrier. Go with it. Eat more. You have
Yeah.
days where you're much thirstier. Go with it. Drink more. I mean, I have days I was like, oh my gosh, I drank 8 bottles of water,
Yeah.
which is not usual for me, but there was a day I did that, so I just went with it. But when that happens, I also know I need to repeatedly take more electrolytes, because I can't take the same amount of electrolytes and increase my water that much and not have symptoms, a headache or not feeling good or not having energy. So I just noticed I have these sitting on the desk. They're the Keto Chow electrolyte tablets. I love these. Love. It is much easier for me than even the drops. Like, if I feel like a little bit off, I'll just, like, I always have water sitting here and I have these sitting here. I'll just take one, drink it. So getting used to having a little baggie of salt with you, or getting used to just having some source of electrolytes around, is a really good way to, when you incorporate fasting into your life regularly.
Yeah, I carry in my purse, I carry the Keto Chow little baby dropper thing, and I also carry the little Redmond salt, little tiny salt shaker. Because if I need something when I'm out, like I could literally, that salt shaker, like you know, you could just toss some in your mouth, drink some water, and it's very convenient, and you can have it with you all the time.
Yes. And when you do incorporate fasting into your life regularly, these things won't seem strange to you, that you carry
Right.
around a bag of salt or something like that, because you just realize the importance of electrolytes in the whole process, and not getting what you need, not getting that. A lot of people are like, I can't fast. And what they're missing out on the experience and doing something really good for themselves because of the electrolyte issue.
So one thing we didn't talk about, like I made a post a couple days ago about like what can I drink when I'm on a fast. So you know, when you're like, I listed it like in order of, you know, least impact to most impact. The goal, like the ultimate goal, is to be water only. But sometimes people, when they start fasting, you know, there's a mindset issue. They think they, you know, they need something. So there are things, you know, that you can do. Like most optimal is water only, but some people drink black coffee. Some people do the
Tea.
like apple cider vinegar, or they, you know, in water, or they do tea. And then there are some people who even ease into it by doing what's called fat fasting, which,
That's how we started. You
that's
remember?
how I started fat. Exactly.
Yeah.
I just drank fatty coffee, you know, to ease into, and then eventually, like, you know, you back off of that and you graduate to water. But some people
Hmm.
do like the fatty coffee or bone broth. Um, a little bit of fat to keep you going, because Dr. Fung calls it the training wheels of fat.
Training wheels. Yeah, fasting on training wheels. It's better to do, like, if you want to fast for, let's say you're doing OMAD, you're doing 1 meal a day, and it's still 6 hours till you eat, and you can have one of your training wheel things and it keeps you fasted. It's still huge benefit. It is much better to make a small accommodation and have a fatty coffee or some bone broth than to just give up on your fast and fully break. So, so it's not without benefit to have some fat for your fast. But it isn't, I don't think that's the best way to do it forever. I think it's a bridge to
hence the training wheels. You just use it for a little bit of time until you are ready to, like, go on the big bike, right? So you can ease into it, but, like, especially with, like, extended fast. I know when I first started doing, like, my first extended fast was 3 days. And I drank coffee during that time. And then the next time I did it, I drank it less and less. And then I eventually graduated to, extended fasting with water only. But that's what I needed at the time, because
and you shouldn't feel bad about it.
And I had never, there's no guilt there, but I had never not eaten for 3 days before. So I had the mindset battle going on, and I needed that little crutch to avoid the food. And so you're still getting a benefit, even if you're getting, a little bit of fat calories. Your body's not having to process that solid food, and you're still getting a benefit.
And your insulin is barely interrupted, and it quickly returns back to rest. So if you think about it like that, you're still accomplishing what you want to accomplish.
So we're almost done. We're about to wrap it up. So any last minute burning questions before we sign off?
Go ahead. Ask Mary where she got her fabulous necklace. I know that's the burning question that everybody has.
Lord, I don't even remember.
It is funny though. Mary and I do a lot of groups together, and people ask us lots of stuff, and we're like, "Cool, ask us." I'm like, "Ask me about my eyebrows. It's fine. Yes, they're tattooed, So we don't care. We're so open. But it's also fun. I mean, we're just real people like you, and the reason that we are experts on this is just because we've done it over and over and over again, and read everything we could get our hands on. And when you do something repeatedly and you experiment and you read about it and you research, and you get to be really good at it. And I would say we're really good at fasting. So that's how we know what we're doing. We didn't take a class.
Right. All right, everybody. So our next call. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Fasting would be a really good topic for you two to do on our next cruise in 2022.
Ooh,
right?
Love that. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Lord, I hope that cruise can happen and normal, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
I agree.
Yes. Yeah. So I love that idea. Yes. Love it.
Yeah, that would be great. Oh, Carrie says she just saw the chat thing. Did you have any questions, Carrie?
Carrie, yes. She's like, how are people asking these questions? We are reading people's minds. We're saying, I feel like Debbie's asking.
So, okay. All right. So there's no more questions. Our next chat is going to be 2 weeks from now. When it's going to be
right next week. You guys, next week I will be celebrating a very special anniversary, and I am going to Florida. So I will still be posting in the group and stuff, but it's kind of a big deal. We don't ever go anywhere. It's very exciting.
Big anniversary. And she's not going to really be working. She's going to do a little bit of, like, typing, but no working, which is big.
I've never ever in all this time, I have never not done calls. Even on vacation, if I was at the beach, I always still did them, and I'm not intending to do that. So we'll see.
Carrie says no, she just wanted to be here. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. For next time. And the next one, we're really going to be focused on extended fasting. But of course, we're going to continue to put out little videos, important information daily. Usually either Mary will post or I'll post, or sometimes both of us We don't want to overwhelm you with stuff. But more than anything, just know you've got us both at your fingertips. Ask us anything, anytime. Just come to the group and ask.
Yeah,
And we'd be happy to answer that.
whatever you need.
It does. It goes by super fast.
It
So.
does. All right, everybody. Thanks so much, and we'll see you back here in a couple weeks.
All right.